given all these macro forces that you just described so vividly and that you're tracking on an ongoing basis, let's turn our attention to the micro, pragmatic, real here and now. Are there any pivotal changes that you're making when you interact with your clients now, say 2-3? So imagine you've been in this consulting space for quite some time. Are there any pivotal changes or very significant or very nuanced things that you're doing differently now with the clients?
Well, there's again a number of different levels that we could speak to here in terms of, well, first, how we think about how we engage with clients. We're constantly trying to adapt that and evolve it. And we've kind of very deliberately created a model for our business that allows that. So for us, I think, without sounding arrogant, I think we're kind of a bit of ahead of the curve in terms of these different ways to engage and different ways to work with clients and different ways to evolve. And then another level is the work that we're doing now. In some ways, it reminds me a lot, at least here in this part of the world, reminds me a little bit of 2017. And I'll say that because that was the year in particular that Amazon really started to come into Australia. And for about 18 months, that was our #1 category of work. So everyone's asking, what does Amazon mean? Will it disrupt retail, et cetera, right? Very interesting. And then it didn't, or it played a role, and an equilibrium came, and it sort of, it was a part of the picture, but it wasn't really the big overwhelming disruption that perhaps many people thought it would be. And I feel the same about what's happening with AI. Like I said, it's one of our top areas that we're working on with clients, is because we're a disruption related firm. This is disruptive, and everyone's asking the question, what's it going to mean? Where's the opportunity? What should I do differently, and when? And very importantly, when? And how does that then translate into deploying resources now and into the future? It's inevitable, but I would say that at a fundamental level, not yet. Everyone's still in an experimental, let's see what happens phase. The way is being led by startups. However, there are lots of firms with very large scale investments to either experiment or attempt to scale particular use cases in their firms. In particular, I'd say banking and finance kind of leading the way. Obviously, technology, chatbots are playing a key role in customer service, and that's been happening already for a while. So look, it's already, what they say about innovation, right? The future is unevenly distributed, and in many ways that future is here now, but you may not see it. So a lot of these things are already happening. But in terms of like professional services in particular, we're finding ourselves working with a lot of accounting and law firms in particular, asking the big question: how is professional services going to be different? What is the future of professional services? What capabilities should we invest in now to be prepared for the future? What business models and opportunities will evolve, and how should we craft these? How can we serve our clients and customers in different ways? Which parts of our business are going to be here in 5 years, and which ones aren't? These are all questions that we're being asked all the time. And it's very interesting because, of course, many of these industries haven't changed for decades and decades and decades, right? So, however, if you flip it all upside down, like for our business, the big question, we've sort of looked at this and said, well, will AI put us out of business? In the short term, the answer is no, because firms and leaders need to figure out how AI is going to affect their business, and they want humans to help them solve those problems and work with them and co-create solutions to them. They're not asking the technology yet. In the long term, it will play a role, probably the big phase that will follow that, once we kind of get some more normalization across, a plurality of new use cases in different professional services domains, then the next thing will be, how do we do what we do better, faster, cheaper? And that will be largely about really taking labor out in some ways and or probably a better way to is redeploying labor to more complex and, to your point, nuanced problem sets, and using the technology to solve the more routine ones. For example, the annual audit, right? If you feed the machine with all of the disclosures and all of the financial statements and the risk register and all of that, it's not hard to imagine that the machine will be able to do 80, 90, increasingly 95, even 100% of that in some cases. So some of those parts of the work will go away. But my deep hope for professional services is that will free us all up to solve the next more complex, more interesting challenge for our clients, which increasingly we'll be using those tools to help us solve, take the routine out of that, so that we can use our creative minds to discover, the next opportunity for our clients. So I see it as a potential liberating force for my firm, in a sense that, if we can find ways to move the routine out, to help clients to do the same, to help us all focus on the bigger, more important, more complex, more interesting, more creative problem and opportunity sets, that's just magic for how we could spend our time in our in our next phase of work. So not everyone will see it that way. Many will see it as a threat. I look at these things purely as opportunity, and I try to make sure that our clients are always in that mindset: be on the front foot, not the back foot, play offense, not defense, see opportunity, not problems. And that sort of then translates into it translates into lots of things, but I think it will translate into opportunities for many people that don't exist today. I'm very excited about all of that.
Interesting, Matt. Are there any specific things that you're seeing in terms of behavioral shifts that you feel leaders will need to make when they're dealing with these kind of things?
Yeah, this is a great question. Okay, so this is an area I've been thinking very deeply about, and I'm increasingly now coming to the conclusion that the vertical command and control hierarchy in firms is run its course, because there's just too much complexity, and that sort of structure, that sort of paradigm for how we organize, is really designed for long-term stability and not designed for this pace of change that we're experiencing. So I think that has to be unraveled and re-raveled in a new way, perhaps much more horizontally, in a sense that, leaders are going to have to prioritize more and more how they bring talent and capability together, including the machines, and vector those towards problem sets. And then what they'll be doing every day is kind of coordinating the smashing together of this talent to do those things, which will look very different than our kind of command and control functional structures. So then that invites the next layer of what is the role of the leader at any level. It could be the board, the CEO, or team leader, out in the field somewhere. It doesn't really matter. But I think the paradigm shift for leadership is almost to now become the chief bottleneck officer. You know what I mean? Where how do you spend more and more of your time and attention bringing together the talent, bringing together the insights, and then importantly, removing these obstacles that are coming up at a rate of knots to help people achieve, or to exploit these opportunities, or to resolve the problem sets that are coming out of it. So I think there's a really interesting territory of, it's not just about getting everyone behind and communicating a vision anymore. It's to your point about nuance, the role of the leader, I think, is also going to invert, in a sense that the leader will now have to more and more serve the firm, and more serve the opportunities, serve the problem set. And that creates a mindset that that leadership should be spending a large portion of their time identifying and removing these obstacles at a rate of knots, so that I think there's a terrific book that one of my colleagues put me onto, which is called Moonshot, which was a story which you're familiar with, of course, which is a story about how Pfizer was able to compress the development cycle for the vaccine and during COVID. Now they broke a lot of dishes along the way, but you're largely taking you're taking a 7 or 8 year development cycle and compressing it to 1 year, which will now be the expectation. Okay, so that's the new benchmark, and these firms are going to be working, to work out how do we now deliver that across all of our programs. And, maybe the average moves down from 7 to 8 years to 4 years, but that'll be a huge shift. And to really operate that way, it's challenge every orthodoxy, surface every assumption, and leadership really playing a very assertive role in, just constant bottleneck removal. And I think that's where we're heading. I think that we're going to be just operating in a different way. And I also think that because of that inversion that we talked about in terms of the world of employment is changing too, and potentially employees like my father, who spent 30 years at Kodak, the idea that you're going to join a firm and spend 30 years there is almost absurd to a whole generation of people now. And that could be an insight from a decade ago. But I think the follow-on really insight to me on that is that in order to change as a firm, we've got to look at talent and capability as an ever-evolving portfolio. And our ability to have a high refresh rate of that portfolio will be an essential leadership talent. And I don't just mean people in terms of capability. I mean all of the capabilities, capital and plant and equipment and, AI and machine learning technology, digital, all of it, right? All has to be refreshed at a much faster rate. So leadership is really going to need to be, very deliberate about breaking down these structures that have worked so well for us for a century and that aren't really well suited for what's around the corner. And there's a lot of work to be done to kind of find that equilibrium in terms of the hybrid of some of it will still work for a period of time, but some of it will need to change, and it'll be very complex to manage in these different worlds at the same time. And it'll be a delight to help these firms deal with these issues. But I think that fundamentally we have to lead differently, of course.
Interesting. I'm just sort of cheeky thing that I'm sliding in, and maybe you can speak to that. I'm reminded of E.O. Wilson's, I think it was E.O. Wilson who said that we've got Paleolithic emotions and brains and medieval institutions, and I may be getting it wrong, and I'll put that in the edit. But I think what he meant was we've got something which is Paleolithic, and institutions are medieval, and we have got godlike technology in our hands, and that's the challenge you're facing in our times. How do you speak to something like that? Because the changes that you has this component of human nature and the interpersonal space, right? The egos and the territorial instincts and confirmation biases and stuff. So while biases and habits are a feature, they can also be a bug in some sense. So
right. So I'll first preface by saying I'm not familiar with that work, but the concept that you've described to me sounds about right, in a sense that we did evolve for a different, to suit a different age, if you will. And, the fascinating thing, like even with COVID, right? And where I live, we had, climate change and really, I don't know if you read about the bushfires that happened here in 2018, well, the end of 2018, 2019.
Yes.
So it was international, right? And this is now, I think yesterday may have been, and I don't quote me on this, may have been the hottest day recorded ever on the planet on an average temperature basis. Okay, wow. So you're looking at these things and you're saying like, wow, these changes are not just digital, they're macro. And fundamentally, like I look at COVID, and it's now almost to a point where it almost never existed in some parts of the world. Like it's completely forgotten about. Same with the bushfires. Policy hasn't changed, whatever. People have just moved on or snapped back to the reality that they hoped that existed before, which maybe doesn't. So one scenario is that this technological sort of change will flow over us and we'll absorb it, and we'll try to snap back to the way things always were, because I think at its deepest level, what humans seek are safety and comfort, sort of the Abraham Maslow hierarchy. We like certainty at the bottom, and we like safety at the bottom, and therefore the changes do, as you pointed out earlier, require stimulus to get us to really make those shifts. So I think on an average basis, I think those elements of human behavior, fundamentally aren't going to change. We still do seek safety. We still do seek comfort from our peers and our families and things like that. Ego and some of us have it and some of us don't. Some of us used to have it and have evolved beyond it. Some of us haven't. We're human beings still, and many of those things are at the deepest level gonna be the invisible tiller, the invisible hand on our behavior and how we operate. And I don't see a lot of that. Those things can't change in one generation or even two generations, I don't think. But again, they can change dramatically in pockets of our society, and we'll all be struggling to keep up. Like let's take COVID. If COVID was 10% worse, let's just say the global death rate was 10% worse, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now. No chance of it, right? We'd all be scrambling to survive, because just the ripples from that, how bad it was, and whatever you believe about the reality or otherwise of COVID, if it was really that much worse, that sort of thin veneer of society would have really crumbled in lots of places at a level much more significantly. And I think we've got these things that are coming at us with climate change and other things that make make it more likely that these things are going to happen at a tectonic level more and more often. So we're going to have to learn to adapt. In some ways, those very things that we just discussed will be challenged at their deepest core. So yeah, that's the scary part about where we're at. But over and over again, the thing that I've learned from the bushfires and from what we learned from the global wars is that just how resilient we are as a species, right? We're very resilient. So my expectation and hope is that we'll find clever ways to innovate around these big challenges. And, for many of us, there'll be prime movers and there'll be others that are the recipients of all that hard work. And we'll carry on, perhaps, albeit in maybe a different, it'll look different, just like, it's hard to reflect for us at our age, because things appear to change so slowly. But you remember the 1980s, right? You remember them. They were different fundamentally. We didn't have these things, and we didn't have a computer. We couldn't do this that we're doing now, each of us on each, and 9,000 kilometers apart, right? These were unimaginable things that we're doing now. So we've absorbed these things and we've changed. And I think we can continue to do so.
On that optimistic note, Matt, and with a lot of curiosities that I'm sure we'll find time to come back and address them, I would leave you for your next stuff for the day. And thank you so much for sharing any closing comments that you would like to leave us with?
I'd just like to congratulate you for asking such really great questions, and you've obviously mastered your art here, which is terrific. And the other thing is, I'd also like to thank you for your almost 2 decades of friendship. So thanks for staying in touch and keeping me involved in the many things that you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you so much. Thank you.